Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a misty corner of the ancient world. Picture this: sunrise over a small Chinese town more than 2,500 years ago. The air smells like wet clay and steaming millet porridge. You're standing on the dusty road where oxen grunt and wheelbarrows creak, and somewhere nearby, a newborn baby is wailing with remarkable determination. His head is a bit too large, his family dirt poor, and his future complicated. You're about to spend the night walking in the soft-soled shoes of Confucius, a man who never led an army, never ruled a kingdom, and yet changed the course of human thought more than most generals ever did. The punchline: you probably wouldn't last a day in his world. No air conditioning, no deodorant, and the only entertainment is arguing about how to sit properly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always read those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a fading dynasty, the Zhou Dynasty, to be precise. The empire's old glories are cracking like dry paint. Regional warlords squabble like toddlers with weapons, and society is held together mostly by ritual, superstition, and very stern eyebrows. This is the world Kong Qian is born into, circa 551 BCE, in the state of Lu. You arrive in the town of Qifu, which even then smells like damp stone and bureaucratic incense. His family is technically noble but financially devastated, like owning a Gucci robe with moth holes. His father, a respected warrior, is so old when Confucius is conceived that historians suspect some eyebrow-raising arrangements were involved. Some say he already had concubines, others whisper about fertility ceremonies with strong wine and prayer beads. Historians still argue whether Confucius was born from a socially acceptable union or an act of pure desperation. The father dies when Confucius is just 3. You're now the boy, watching your mother wrap herself in mourning robes, black hair pinned tightly, speaking in hushed tones that carry centuries of grief. Poverty isn't just a concept here, it's woven into your sleeves. You eat what you can grow or beg for, and toys are made from sticks or your own imagination. But even at 5, you're not like the other kids. While they chase chickens and throw pebbles at frogs, you're bowing formally to a patch of wind-blown grass, muttering something about propriety. Neighbors glance over fences. That's Kong's boy, they say. Bit odd, that one. Talks to himself and reads bones. Reading bones, by the way, isn't just a turn of phrase. Oracle bones, burned and cracked to divine the future, are all the rage. And young Confucius? He studies them obsessively. Not because he believes in magic, but because he wants to understand why people do. You sit at your mother's feet at night, squinting at candlelight as she reads aloud from old poems and ritual manuals. There's no bedtime story, just verses about ancient kings, seasonal sacrifices, and how many times you must bow when entering a room. Somehow, it soothes you. Your first joke comes early. When a pompous merchant scolds you for stepping out of his way too slowly, you bow deeply and say, "Forgive me, I mistook your robes for someone wise." It doesn't go over well. But your mother laughs for the first time in months. She sacrifices everything to feed your education. Cloth is patched until it's more patch than cloth. Meals shrink to root vegetables and broth. But you keep learning rituals, music, genealogy, and early moral philosophy. You begin to imagine a world where chaos is replaced with order, not through war, but through virtue. At night, you dream of ancient sages walking beside you, whispering in riddles. In the morning, you recite what they told you, confusing your mother and mildly terrifying your neighbors. You're a poor child with noble blood and a thirst for meaning that no food can satisfy. And one evening, As crickets chirp and the moon slides across the courtyard tiles, you sit with your knees tucked under you and murmur, "There must be a way." You're still a child, but your mind is older than your years. In the early mornings, while others still snore under straw blankets, you're sweeping the family courtyard with deliberate precision. Every stroke has a rhythm. Left to right. Right to left. You say it keeps the world aligned, but really, it's the only thing that gives your day structure. Your neighborhood whispers about you. The boy who bows before trees, they mutter. Talks like a minister, dresses like a beggar. You take it as a compliment. As you grow, you start asking questions that no one wants to answer. Why do we honor ancestors with burnt paper offerings? Do they really need ghost money? Why must we kneel to a Lord who doesn't feed his people? Why does everyone nod and smile when a corrupt official walks by? You push boundaries in subtle ways. During a local harvest ritual, you add an extra bow, not to confuse the spirits, but because it feels right. When someone asks who gave you permission, you respond softly, "Heaven did." You're not trying to be difficult. You're trying to understand why everyone else is so comfortable being confused. Historians still argue whether Confucius was truly religious or just reverently agnostic. You respect the spirits, honor the heavens, perform every rite with care, but you never stop questioning the machinery behind it all. At 15, you're already tall, thin, with eyes that see more than they should. Your mother calls you Kong Chiu, but in your own head, you start to form a different identity, one shaped by books, not bloodlines. You comb through ancient texts like others sift rice. You read about Duke Zhou, the semi-mythical ruler who supposedly ruled through virtue, not fear. You fall in love with him a little. Maybe not in the romantic sense, but the way someone falls in love with an idea that promises life could be better. Your favorite part of the day? Shadowing elderly scholars in the town square. You carry scrolls for them, sweep the dust from their sitting mats, and memorize everything they say, even their coughs. They tolerate you like a barn cat that occasionally recites poetry. Eventually, one of them, an old record keeper with trembling hands and tobacco-stained teeth, gives you your first scroll. It's faded and frayed, probably older than your entire bloodline. You cradle it like treasure, and at night you sleep with it under your mat. Your life becomes a quiet rebellion. You keep the customs, but invert their meaning. When someone mocks you for bowing too often, you smile and say, "Better to bend often than break suddenly." There's a rumor that you once corrected a senior ritualist mid-ceremony. Supposedly, he declared a solar date wrong and you whispered, "According to the spring and autumn annals, the proper date is tomorrow." He turned red, but changed it anyway. You find part-time work to support your mother, odd jobs, mostly clerical. Counting grain, tracking cattle transactions, helping elders write down contracts. You learn that the world runs on both paper and pretense. One day, you spot a wealthy man cheating a peasant in a grain deal. You step in, not with fists, but with a question: if profit comes from deception, do you gain grain, or lose your virtue? The man sneers. The peasant stares. You don't win the argument, but you plant a seed. You start keeping your own notebook, a bamboo slip journal tied together with cord. Every evening, you jot down what you saw, what went wrong, and what could have been done with more kindness. You call it your Book of Shadows, though there's nothing occult about it, just a long list of ways to be slightly better. Once, you dream you're standing before the gods, and they ask what you want. You say, "I want people to treat each other as if heaven is always watching, but not judging." The gods are silent. You take that as encouragement. In your village, most boys your age are preparing for marriage or military conscription. You're preparing to rewrite society. At 17, you lose your mother. It happens in the quiet way that grief often does, slowly at first, then all at once. You perform the morning rituals with such precision that onlookers weep just watching you. But inside, you break. She was your anchor, your reason, your link to childhood. Now, you're alone. You build a small shrine for her in the corner of your home. Light incense daily. Speak to her as if she's still fixing your collar. And every time you bow, you whisper the same promise: I will make sense of this world, so no child has to cry this way again. You begin to feel the early thrum of purpose, not ego, not fame. Just a quiet certainty that the chaos can be calmed. That the rituals aren't just for show. That people, despite their foolishness, can be taught to stand straighter, speak softer, and live better. And you're going to show them how. You're 19 now, thin as ever, wearing your patched robes like armor. The mornings come colder. Your little home smells more like scroll ink than soup. You need money, but not just to eat. You need it for ink, for candles, for access to books guarded by bureaucrats who think curiosity is a disease. So, you take your first real job. It's not glamorous. You become a warehouse clerk. The building smells like millet, mold, and sweat. The ledgers are handwritten, disorganized, and crusted with years of spilled porridge. Your first task: sort rice tallies from tax rolls. It's like solving a murder mystery using only math and mouse droppings. You treat the work like it matters. You count every grain twice. You color code bundles with ink dots. You even introduce a primitive signature system so that merchants can't fudge the logs and pretend the rats ate their tax payment. Your boss, an aging official with perpetual eye bags and the personality of wet bamboo, pulls you aside. You're making everyone else look bad, he grumbles. You bow. Then let them work harder. He blinks. It's the boldest thing he's heard in years. Eventually, they promote you. Now you're managing animal herds for the treasury. Your days are filled with numbers, hoof prints, and dung. You name the oxen after lines from poems. One particularly stubborn mule you call Silent Dignity. It kicks you every week. But this job isn't just about animals. It's about patterns, why things fail, why people lie, why systems collapse from laziness. One evening, you catch a miner noble skimming grain from the reserves. You don't confront him directly. Instead, you quietly adjust the records to expose the shortfall. When the noble is publicly reprimanded, you say nothing. But the warehouse boys start calling you the Quiet Thunder. Historians still debate whether Confucius ever intended to become a civil servant or if the role simply became the only path to systemic change. Either way, you wear the title lightly but take the responsibility seriously. During lunch breaks, while others nap, you study old tomb inscriptions. You're fascinated by how people choose to be remembered. Some boast about battles, others about children. A few, the rare few, are praised for justice, fairness, or wisdom. You underline those names. You begin mentoring a few younger clerks. You don't call it mentoring, you just ask questions. Why did you record that bribe as a donation? Or, do you think fairness is expensive? They squirm, think, and slowly start changing. Late at night, you return home to your tiny room, light a candle, and write more notes. These aren't records now, they're ideas. Drafts of principles. You begin shaping them into what later becomes the Analects, though you don't know it yet. You propose one of your first big ideas over a pot of boiled barley. What if people governed themselves by shame, not punishment? Your friend stares at you. You mean guilt? You shake your head. No, dignity. The fear of disappointing others. You're starting to attract attention. Some local elites think you're too clever. One accuses you of overthinking grain. Another says you quote poems too often. But the common workers respect you. They say, he listens like a friend but talks like a bell. One day, a tax collector tries to bribe you to lose a shipment. You politely refuse. He gets offended. Don't be self-righteous, he sneers. You think the world changes because you're honest. You smile gently. No. But it doesn't get worse because I'm not. He never speaks to you again. You're not famous yet. Not even close. But small ripples are starting to move through the pond. Your colleagues begin arriving earlier. Arguments at the warehouse drop. Even the oxen seem calmer, except Silent Dignity, who still kicks. One cold winter morning, while scratching a diagram into the dirt to explain balance sheets, a junior clerk says, "You should teach." You pause. I am. By the time you reach your early 20s, you're balancing numbers by day and rewriting civilization in your head by night. And somewhere deep inside, you realize, this job is temporary. Not because you dislike it, but because your work isn't really about livestock or ledgers. It's about people. And people need more than arithmetic. They need principles. You're 23, maybe 24. Dates get slippery when no one's writing them down for you. Your robes are still patched, your sandals still thin, but your voice. It's becoming something new. A calm firmness. A tone that makes people stop slurping their tea just to listen. You're still working civil service jobs. Still sorting tallies, reconciling livestock reports, and occasionally calming a goat that has wandered into the accounts office. But the job no longer defines you. You've begun speaking to people, quietly, softly, sometimes even with humor, and they remember what you say. You're not just quoting ancient lines now. You're reinterpreting them. Turning dry phrases into gentle instruction. Ritual without feeling, you say one morning, is like music without melody. The old accountant across from you stops chewing. Did you make that up? You just smile. At night, your home becomes a gathering place. Not officially. There's no fee. Just floor mats, warm barley tea, and scrolls stacked like firewood. Local youth, some from good families, some from none, begin showing up. They call you Z, a respectful term for teacher. You wave them off at first. I'm just a clerk who can read. But they keep coming. You start organizing your thoughts, not in volumes, but in sayings. Short, clear. Digestible even when sleep-deprived or wine-blurred. Things like, it is not the robe that gives dignity. Or, a crooked mind cannot give straight answers. One night, you ask a group of students, what do you think makes a person good? They offer answers, obedience, sacrifice, wealth. You shake your head. Ren, you say. Benevolence. Humanity. The warmth that makes us human. That word, Ren, becomes a seed. You water it across years. Historians still debate whether you invented this concept or refined it from earlier thought. What's agreed upon is this: you gave it life. Made it portable. Gave it form and feeling. By this point, you've read everything accessible. Ritual books, military texts, poems, weather logs. You find meaning in everything, even how a funeral wail echoes in an alley. You're especially drawn to the Book of Songs. Not just because it's old, but because it's honest. Love, loss, longing, all preserved like fruit in winter. You begin to quote it not to show off, but to translate emotion when words fall short. When someone asks how to show proper respect to parents, you don't hand them a manual. You tell a story about a boy who carried his father's empty sandals home every night after work. Why? they ask. To remind himself that someone once carried him. You're becoming more than a man, you're becoming a mirror. People speak to you and hear themselves reflected back, kinder and clearer. But not everyone is thrilled. Some elders call you disrespectful for questioning long-standing rituals. Who are you to challenge the ancients? One of them demands. You bow, slowly. I don't challenge. I ask. Because if something is wise, it will answer. You get slapped for that one. It's worth it. There's a rumor that you once lectured a nobleman in full armor about humility. He asked what gave you the right. You replied, the same thing that gives the moon the right to light the night, someone has to. You develop what your students call your 5 virtues. You don't label them yet, but you talk about them constantly. Ren, benevolence, Li, ritual propriety, E, righteousness, Ji, wisdom, and Xin, trustworthiness. They're less a list and more a rhythm. You speak of them the way a musician speaks of notes. Together, they create harmony. Alone, they're just noise. You even start joking during lessons. If you think you've mastered humility, you say, just wait until your wife corrects your grammar. Laughter. A little too loud from the back of the room. Some nights, you wonder if you're wasting time. The state is corrupt. War is constant. Your students are few. But then one of them, a shy boy who used to stutter, recites a full ritual from memory, and bows perfectly. And you think, maybe this is how change begins. One whisper at a time. You're 30 now. A solid, worn-in 30. The kind of 30 where your joints pop when you sit too long, and the temples of your hair start whispering about the future. You've been teaching, writing, debating, dreaming. But something in you shifts. You no longer want to wait for the world to come to your door. You want to go out and meet it, dusty roads, strange dialects, and all. You pack a satchel, tuck a few scrolls under your arm, kiss the floor of your childhood home goodbye, and begin walking. You become a wanderer, not because you've lost something, but because you're looking for someone. Specifically, someone in power. A ruler. A duke. A minister with a conscience. Anyone who might listen long enough for you to say, hey, I have some ideas that might make your kingdom suck less. The roads are not gentle. They don't care that you're on a mission. They offer mud in the wet season, cracked stone in the dry, and a suspicious number of barking dogs year-round. You travel with a few loyal students, a walking stick, and the kind of optimism that makes people suspicious. In one town, a man offers you a seat by the fire and says, you're too hopeful. That's dangerous. You nod, smile, and steal half his dumplings. In every town you reach, you try to speak with local officials. Sometimes they humor you. Sometimes they nod politely, then disappear. Occasionally, they insult your robes. One famously said, if your ideas were valuable, someone would have bought them by now. You bowed and replied, that's why I give them away. Historians still argue whether your journey was naive or noble. But one thing is clear, you believed the world could be realigned, not by sword, but by sincerity. You reach the court of a mid-sized state. The ruler is bored, well-fed, and mildly drunk. You give him your best pitch, govern with virtue, lead by example, restore rituals, and the people will follow. He responds by asking if you've ever tried fermented apricot wine. You haven't. It's terrible. Still, you keep trying. You offer to consult on tax fairness. You offer to reform the palace education system. You even offer to help organize public festivals so people stop stabbing each other in line. Sometimes, you do get through. A local judge reforms his sentencing guidelines after hearing you speak. A merchant lowers his grain prices after you explain that profit built on suffering rots faster than moldy millet. But more often, you're ignored. You sleep in stables, eat bitter herbs, and tie your sandals with hope. You give lectures to empty courtyards. Once, you speak so passionately to a bored gatekeeper that he offers you his boiled turnip in apology. You eat it. It's awful. But it's honest. One moonless night, your group is robbed. The bandits take your ink, your food, your blanket, and leave the scrolls. One student starts to cry. You just pat his shoulder and say, even they know what's sacred. Despite the hardship, you keep moving. You treat every city like a classroom. Every conversation like a lesson. You start to see patterns. The poor are kinder, the rich more afraid, and everyone is desperate for something to believe in, even if they pretend not to be. You meet a man selling fake miracle cures. When you ask him if he believes his medicine works, he shrugs and says, it gives them hope. You stare into his eyes and say, then sell them truth. It lasts longer. One village throws stones at you. Another offers dumplings. You begin to realize you're not here to be liked. You're here to plant seeds in places so dry they crack. Every evening, your group sits around a fire and you reflect. You ask your students, what did we learn today? One says, that people don't want to change. You correct him gently, that people are afraid to try. You begin writing down more sayings. Teaching moments. Parables. When asked why you never stop traveling, you reply, because the way does not walk itself. By now, you're tired. Not in the bones, yet, but in the soul. You thought the world would be eager to embrace virtue. Instead, you find corruption slick as oil. Still, you whisper to the stars before sleeping, I'll try again tomorrow. And you do. You're 35, give or take, and someone finally says yes. Not a full yes. More of a maybe. A trial run. But you'll take it. You've been offered a role, an official position in the government of Lu, your home state. It's a bit like being invited to dinner by your ex, exciting, suspicious, and slightly dangerous. You accept with gratitude and zero illusions. Your first assignment: oversee the city's granaries and livestock markets. You try not to laugh. After everything, every lecture, every sleepless road, you're back to counting cows. But this time, you have authority. You begin by reducing corruption, not with punishment, but with paperwork. You create ledgers so clear, so honest, that bribes become obvious. You train clerks to double-check inventories. You introduce surprise audits, which terrify everyone. And here's the kicker, you don't take a single bribe. Not one. Word spreads fast. They call you Kong the Upright, and while you wish it sounded cooler, you accept the compliment. Historians still debate whether your administrative success was due to your methods or simply because people were too afraid to disappoint you. You move up. Quickly. You're appointed Minister of Crime. Ironically, crime drops. Not because you're harsh, but because you're precise. You apply the law like a scalpel, not a club. You pardon the repentant, punish the malicious, and always, always, explain your decisions. One noble demands why his son was publicly shamed for assaulting a servant. You reply, because nobility without virtue is a shadow pretending to be a tree. He storms off. The people applaud. You reinstate rituals, processions, ancestor rites, public ceremonies. Not for pomp, but for unity. When people move together, you say, they remember they belong together. You begin shaping your grand experiment, a society governed not by fear or convenience, but by principle. Your students serve alongside you, Some oversee market reform. Others manage schooling. A few even help draft policies, which you revise with the same care you'd give a sacred text. You eliminate death sentences for theft. Instead, you assign community service and public confession. Shame is sharper than the axe, you tell skeptics. One day, a senior official mocks your soft approach. You think manners can replace soldiers, he chuckles. You look him dead in the eyes. A man who bows in peace will not need to kneel in war. There are victories. Real ones. Tax collection becomes fairer. Education improves. Fewer citizens are beaten in the streets by bored guards. But peace is fragile. Lu is surrounded by rival states. One day, a neighboring king sends a gift of dancers, 80 of them. Beautiful. Talented. Politically toxic. Your duke, swayed by wine and flattery, begins to lose focus. Meetings are missed. Laws delayed. You raise concerns, gently at first. Then firmly. Finally, publicly. You say, when the ruler forgets the law, the people remember chaos. And just like that, you're inconvenient again. You're told to take a break. A sabbatical. You recognize exile when you hear it. You pack your scrolls, your sandals, your silence. Your students beg you to stay. Some even cry. You simply bow. We serve virtue, not comfort. If it's unwelcome here, we'll find it elsewhere. As you walk away from your greatest success, your reform, your hope, you don't rage. You don't grumble. You hum a verse from the Book of Songs. The wind may blow, but the roots remember the earth. Because you know this isn't the end. Not of your journey. And not of your ideas. You're back on the road, and this time the road feels colder. Not just because of the season, but because of what you've left behind. You had a taste of power, just enough to know it's both useful and dangerous. Still, you walk. You and your students. The ones who refuse to let you wander alone. They carry scrolls and flasks and questions. Always questions. You pass through smaller towns, where officials welcome you like a minor celebrity. They've heard rumors, the men who tamed crime with kindness, who quoted poetry to tax collectors, who refused a noble's bribe and lived to tell about it. But most places don't care. In one village, a man spits at your feet. Another teacher, he scoffs. We need food, not philosophy. You bow and reply, a full stomach without virtue is still an empty life. He mutters something about boiled cabbage and walks away. You're no longer seeking employment. Not really. You're seeking receptivity. A place where your ideas can root. But that place remains elusive. Still, you persist. You speak at markets. Town squares. Temples. Occasionally, in the rain to no one but your students and a confused chicken. In one region, you're invited to debate with a renowned local scholar. The man is sharp, respected, and famously fond of arguing. He opens by saying, "Your words are wind." You smile. Then may they blow away what is rotten. The debate lasts 3 hours. You discuss virtue, loyalty, music, war, love, funerals. At the end, he bows, deeply. I thought I came to win, he says. But I think I came to learn. Historians still argue whether you truly bested every scholar you met, or whether your students just remembered it that way. Either way, your legend grows. You attract new followers. One is a former soldier who lost faith in war. Another is a merchant's son who gave up his inheritance to study ethics. A third is a woman disguised as a man, clever, quick-tongued, who debates better than most of your male disciples. You never call her out. You just ask better questions. You cross rivers, climb hills, survive on porridge and generosity. One winter, your group runs out of food for 3 days. Your students worry. You sit beneath a tree and begin reciting verses about resilience. By the time the sun sets, they're full, not in stomach, but in spirit. Not all encounters are pleasant. One minister accuses you of sedition. Your ideas undermine authority, he says. You bow and reply, only false authority fears virtue. You're escorted out by guards. One town imprisons you for 2 days, just in case. You spend the time rearranging their legal scrolls in alphabetical order. They release you faster than expected. But you also meet strange souls. A man who claims to be the reincarnation of a sacred turtle. A woman who speaks only in riddles and correctly predicts a solar eclipse. A child who composes poems about stars while herding goats. You're collecting more than students now. You're collecting stories. Proof that wisdom flickers everywhere, even in unlikely mouths. You write constantly. On bamboo, on cloth, on whatever survives the rain. Your thoughts grow sharper. Simpler. More focused. You begin distilling entire philosophies into single lines. Like, the noble person asks of themselves, the petty person asks of others. Or, virtue is not in what we endure, but in how we endure it. You laugh more now. Softly. Sleepily. One student asks why. You answer, because the absurd is also holy. And though you're weary, bone-deep weary, you never stop. You've left behind palaces, titles, safety. But in exchange, you've gained a traveling classroom with no walls, no limits, and no script. And for the first time in a long while, you feel truly free. You're well into your 40s now, but your feet still carry you forward. Slower, maybe. Achier. Your sandals are more patch than leather, and your knees argue with every steep road. But your eyes, they've never been sharper. You become a teacher without a classroom, a philosopher without a pulpit, and a wanderer with more followers than most local lords. One morning, while your students stretch and boil rice over a smoky fire, you say, "The road teaches more than the scroll." They nod. One adds, "And blisters teach more than lectures." You laugh. Finally, a disciple with wisdom in his feet. You arrive at a village where the entire local government is too afraid to meet you. Apparently, your reputation precedes you as the man who shames ministers with compliments. Instead, a group of children greets you. You teach them how to fold grass into poetry and recite verses in rhythm with the wind. You leave a line scratched on the temple door, "To educate the young is to plant trees whose shade you may never see." Then there's the day you meet him, the madman. You spot him on the edge of a forest, dressed in tattered robes, eyes like burning charcoal, muttering to himself while arranging stones into the shape of a turtle. He notices you watching. "You've come to fix the world?" he asks. You nod. He laughs. A wild, bitter sound. You can't fix a fish with a flute. You sit beside him. Quietly. He doesn't look at you, but he talks anyway. About war, pride, futility, and the futility of fixing futility. You say, "Perhaps. But if I play the flute long enough, maybe the fish learns to dance." He squints at you. You're either very wise or very stupid. Can't it be both? Historians still debate whether this encounter actually happened. Some say it was metaphor. Others say the madman was a former official broken by grief. Either way, it lives on in your teachings. You meet a monk who lives inside a hollow tree. He refuses to acknowledge your title. Teachers talk, he says. Trees listen. So you sit under the tree for an entire day. No words. No notes. Just breathing with the branches. At sunset, the monk offers you dried mushrooms and says, still talking. You smile. No. Still learning. Your students begin calling these moments tests. Tests of your philosophy. Of your patience. Of your ability to remain soft in a world that hardens men. You pass most of them. But not all. There's a moment in one city, tired, hungry, frustrated, where a wealthy merchant mocks you. Calls you a traveling fraud. You snap. You say something too sharp. Too clever. The silence afterward is heavier than any punishment. Later, under the stars, you whisper, even the teacher forgets the lesson. Your students pretend they didn't hear. But they did. And they love you more for it. You begin crafting new sayings. Simpler. Gentler. Less certain. Like, sometimes the way is walking, not arriving. Or, to be wrong is human. To admit it is noble. Your traveling band becomes something of a legend. People offer you vegetables, lodging, scrolls. Some offer marriage proposals. You politely decline. I'm already wed to the way, you joke. One student, Zilu, is particularly headstrong. Brave, loyal, and just a little too eager to punch the unjust. You teach him to temper fire with water. He teaches you that sometimes water needs a little steam. You teach not from a throne, but from a rice field. From the steps of temples. From under a leaking thatched roof while it rains so hard you have to shout your philosophy just to be heard over the downpour. And still, people come. Not because you're rich. Not because you're famous. But because you speak like someone who's walked the same broken paths they have, and somehow, still believes in goodness. Even when your sandals fall apart. Even when the stew is just boiled weeds. You still believe. And now, so do they. You're in your 50s now. The lines on your face have grown deeper, like calligraphy etched by time. Your hair grays in streaks. You've stopped counting miles or towns. You measure the road now by conversations. By moments. By how often people stop you just to ask, are you the one who speaks about virtue in the rain? You're still walking, but not in a straight line. The journey feels like a spiral now, circling through memories and meaning. One early morning, as fog curls around your group like silk, a man with no shoes and a bamboo hat steps into your path. He's lean, sun-darkened, and holding a branch shaped like a question mark. You're the sage, he says, voice hoarse like wind in a cracked flute. I'm a man with tired feet and opinions, you reply. He smirks. Good. Let's argue. And so begins a roadside duel, not with swords, but with metaphors. He speaks in riddles, laughter, and insults. You preach kindness, he says, but would kindness feed a hungry dog? Not always, you admit. But cruelty never will. He circles you like a hawk. The world is crooked wood. Why pretend you can carve it straight? You nod. Because even a crooked beam can hold up a roof. Historians still argue about this encounter. Some believe the man was a wandering Taoist. Others claim he never existed at all, just a symbolic test of your beliefs. But your students swear it happened. Then there's the outlaw. You're resting near a riverbank when he stumbles in, dusty, bleeding, eyes like fire. Your students reach for sticks. You hold up a hand. He sits, drinks your water, listens as you quote poetry about forgiveness. After an hour, he says, "You speak like no one I've robbed." You smile. You listen like someone who wants to stop. He leaves you his knife. You never learn his name. And then, the musician. In a distant town known for its weavers and wine, you hear it, notes drifting through alleyways like sleep. A zither, played with such sorrow it nearly stops your heart. You follow the sound to a woman, blind, her hands moving like water over strings. She doesn't speak at first. Just plays. You wait, kneel, listen. When she finally speaks, it's this: "What use is virtue when the world can't hear its song?" You answer, "Then we play it softer." And wait for silence to grow curious. She laughs. A cracked, beautiful sound. And then she teaches you how to match rhythm with emotion. How to pause in music the same way you pause in speech, to let the listener breathe. Your lessons change after that. You speak slower, with more space. You begin using stories like instruments, building tension, release, rhythm. You tell your students, truth is like a melody, it must be felt to be believed. And not all your encounters are solemn. There's the town where a goat follows you for 3 days. Your students name him Li, after one of your 5 virtues. He eats 2 scrolls, poops on a noble's robe, and headbutts a statue. You sigh and say, "At least he's honest." You meet a cook who claims he can measure a man's soul by how they stir porridge. You let him try. He says, "You're either very wise, or just very tired." You agree. There's a child who insists you must be a wizard, because you know things before I say them. You lean down and whisper, "That's because I've been 10 before." She gasps like you've revealed a spell. You never correct her. Through it all, your students write. They capture your phrases, your tone, your pauses. They begin compiling your thoughts, not as sermons, but as shared moments. Seeds. You don't call it a legacy. You call it a lantern. Something to hold up when the night gets too thick. And though your feet ache more than they used to, and your eyes blur in the evenings, you keep walking. Because everywhere you go, people are still hurting. Still wondering. Still waiting for someone to say, "You matter," not because of what you own, but because of what you choose. And that's what you give them. One town at a time. One whisper at a time. You're nearing 60 now. The road no longer challenges you, it understands you. When you walk, it doesn't push back. The dust knows your sandals. The breeze seems to bend around your voice. You've become part of the landscape, a moving monument of soft-spoken conviction. Then, a chance. A real one. You and your students arrive at the borders of a state called Wei. A middling kingdom. Not the richest. Not the most powerful. But its young prince has heard whispers about the wandering teacher who governs with poetry, commands without shouting, and turns criminals into confessors. You're summoned. At last. The court is grand in the way insecure places tend to be: too much silk, too many titles, not enough listening. Still, the prince meets you with curiosity. He's elegant, thoughtful, and surrounded by people who make decisions based on their robes' embroidery. You speak slowly. Gently. You talk about harmony. About Ren and Li, about virtue guiding the ruler the way stars guide the sailors. He listens. Really listens. For a moment, just a moment, you feel it. That this might be the place. The prince asks you to stay. You nod. You and your students are given quarters near the palace. You begin reviewing policies. meeting ministers, designing curriculums. You even introduce a standardized calendar for rituals, so spring doesn't start in midwinter because someone forgot to consult the moon. You train junior officials in ethics, counsel magistrates, help draft new rites for mourning and celebration. You quote the old kings, then improve on them, quietly, respectfully, and with a wink. But then, the dancers arrive. A gift from a neighboring state. 80 of them. Trained in music, poetry, and flattery. The court shifts overnight. Meetings grow shorter. Banquets grow longer. The prince becomes distracted. You try to reach him. At first with stories, then warnings. Finally, disappointment. You say, when the ruler feasts while his people starve, the kingdom forgets its own name. He frowns. Offers you wine. You decline. You ask to review education plans. He asks if you've ever danced. Historians still argue whether this failure was your greatest heartbreak or your clearest lesson. Maybe both. Your students grow restless. Let's go, they say. This is a wasted effort. But you hesitate. You're older now. Tired. You want this to work. Not for fame. Not for comfort. But because it could have meant something. Still, the dancers win. You leave one morning without a goodbye. Just a note, I came seeking virtue. I found distraction. Back to the road. This time, your steps are slower. Your eyes squint more often. You develop a cough that lingers like a bad poem. Your students begin doing more of the talking. You begin doing more of the listening. You no longer seek courts. Now, you seek clarity. In one quiet village, a farmer gives you a stool and a bowl of hot water. You sit, sipping steam, and say, the world disappoints less when you expect less. The farmer nods. Same with turnips. You both laugh. That night, you sleep better than you have in weeks. You start writing again. Not to persuade, but to remember. You craft stories like folded cloth, soft and warm. You say things like, the tallest tree bows in the wind. Your students just nod now. They don't need to ask what it means. One evening, as the sun bruises the horizon and cicadas whisper beneath the leaves, a student asks, do you regret the prince? You don't answer immediately. Then, no. He was a lesson. Some seeds fall on stone, but the sky still rains. You walk a little longer. But now, even the way seems to walk with you. You return to Lu, not in triumph, but in quiet resignation. It's the same city you left years ago, but it feels different now. Not because it has changed, but because you have. The streets are narrower than you remember. The air smells the same, wood smoke, soy broth, and the ink of bureaucracy, but the voices feel softer. The people bow a little deeper. Children nudge one another and whisper, that's him. You settle into a modest home on the edge of the city. It's nothing grand, a tiled roof that leaks during the monsoon, cracked floor tiles, scrolls stacked in every corner. But to you, it's perfect. Your traveling years are over. The sandals are hung. The road is in your bones now. Your students help set up the space. They clean, organize, catalog scrolls, patch walls. You begin teaching in earnest again, but not for approval, not for prestige. Simply because it's the one thing you've never stopped doing. People come. More than you expect. Young men. Some women, disguised or bold. Even a few gray-haired officials who once ignored you now sit cross-legged on your floor. One even brings wine. I never listened, he admits. You smile. Then we begin again. You rise early each day, light incense, pour tea, and begin with questions. What does it mean to lead? Why does a son obey? Can kindness be taught? You no longer answer these questions. You let the students answer. You guide them. Nudge. Smile. Raise an eyebrow at the particularly pompous ones. Your tone has softened. Not from weariness, but from refinement. You've learned that volume is no match for silence filled with intention. You write more now. Your teachings are gathered on bamboo slips. Your students, now a rotating blur of eager faces, begin compiling your words into collections. Historians call them the Analects. You never named them. You just lived them. Occasionally, someone asks you what you think about fame. You reply, a name echoes loudest after its voice goes quiet. You're still asked to return to politics. Advisors visit. Officials send letters. A few even promise, no dancers this time. You decline. One official tries to flatter you, your name is known across the states. You sip tea and reply, so is garlic. That doesn't make it sweet. But not all your days are gentle. You lose a student. Zilu, the brave one, the hot-headed one, is killed defending a minor lord during a border skirmish. You hear about it days after the fact. You sit in silence for hours. Then you say softly, even the fierce must choose their battles. You begin visiting temples again. Not to pray. Just to sit. To listen to stone breathing. You instruct students on the rites of mourning, not just the rules, but the emotions beneath them. To grieve well, you say, is to honor both the lost and the living. You teach history now not as dates and kings, but as a pattern of choices. You say, the past whispers lessons, if we're quiet enough to hear them. You smile more. You joke with the younger students. You even allow yourself to enjoy the peach trees in the courtyard. One spring morning, you plant a seed. Not a metaphor, an actual seed. Your students ask what kind. You shrug. Let's see what it wants to become. That afternoon, you lecture about patience. The students don't miss the point. You begin to feel your body slow. Your joints argue. Your breath shortens. Some days, you speak less and gesture more. But your presence has become its own kind of lesson. In your quiet, others begin to reflect. In your stillness, they begin to act. You've become more than a teacher now. You've become a reference point. A living scroll. A question mark that teaches others how to search for their own answers. And while your name grows louder in the cities, your voice grows softer in the courtyard. But still, it speaks. You spend your 60s in rhythm with the seasons. Spring is for planting ideas. Summer for long, meandering conversations in the shade. Autumn for reflection. Winter for writing while your joints complain about the cold. Your house in Lu becomes something between a school and a sanctuary. Visitors come not just to learn, but to feel grounded. You've become a still point in a chaotic world. A person who never promised salvation, only sense. You don't give sermons. You give silence, peppered with carefully chosen words. A wise man, you once say, knows when to speak and when to sip tea. You begin revisiting the classics. Not for study, but for editing. Refining. Reworking the words of ancient kings and poets into something more human. You take the book of songs, that ancient anthology of poetry, and rearrange it. Highlighting the verses that speak to virtue, grief, love, and loyalty. If the heart cannot sing, You write in the margin, then the law cannot dance. You edit the book of documents, removing the bombast, emphasizing morality over power. In your version, the gods speak less, and the people matter more. You tackle the spring and autumn annals, a dry chronicle of events in your home state. But under your hand, it becomes something else, philosophical commentary dressed as history. Historians still debate your intentions. Did you rewrite to teach? To manipulate? To preserve your views under the guise of tradition? Perhaps all three. Perhaps none. You never explain. To you, editing the past is not deceit, it's duty. You say, what we remember shapes what we become. You write slowly now. Your hands ache. Bamboo slips slip from your fingers more often. So you dictate. Your students sit attentively, brushes in hand. Some can now finish your sentences. You let them. You begin composing your own verses. Not for glory, not for readers. Just because. Like, the candle flickers not in fear, but in dance. Or, better to light one thought than wait for the empire to brighten. You're asked to name your philosophy. You refuse. Names are useful to the lost, you joke, but I'm already home. You hold open debates in the garden. Not to win, but to sharpen minds. One student claims rulers must be feared. You ask, and what grows in fear's shadow? He stumbles. You wait. Then say, nothing worth feeding. You've created a culture of dialogue. You no longer lecture, you converse. The line between teacher and student blurs. Even rival scholars visit you now. Some arrive intending to mock you. They leave with bamboo slips and new questions. One famously mutters, he didn't change my mind, but he changed how I think. You're invited again to return to court life. Again, you decline. A diplomat offers you land. You thank him and decline. A noble offers you a bronze chariot. You laugh and say, where I walk, wheels are useless. You live simply, by choice. Your bed is a woven mat. Your meals are mostly rice and roots. You insist your guests share both. One day, a student asks what you would do if you were king. You smile. Let poets teach justice. Let farmers teach patience. And let no man sit higher than his conscience. You begin reviewing the rites, the old rituals. Birth, marriage, mourning, music. You don't erase them. You interpret them. You explain their purpose. Ritual, you say, is the choreography of the soul. You organize them not for priests, but for people. Not as magic, but as meaning. You simplify. Clarify. Clean the dust from the bones. By now, your name is spoken with reverence. But you deflect it. If I am a sage, you say, it's because I kept asking questions after others stopped. And in your garden, under a peach tree planted decades earlier, you tell your disciples, when I go, don't weep too loudly. I have walked my path. I have left you lamps. And that's how you live now. Not building monuments, but lighting lamps. You are 70 now. Maybe more. You've stopped counting. Your body is slower, your breaths deeper, your thoughts more like rivers than sparks. You rarely leave your home these days. The garden has become your world, one corner with the bamboo, another with flowering herbs, a bench that creaks just right under you. Even the stones know your steps. Your students visit in rotations. Some stay for weeks, others for moments. A few have become teachers themselves, traveling with your words stitched into their own. You don't correct them. Not anymore. You smile when they misquote you slightly, because it means they're living the ideas, not memorizing them. You've seen many of them grow, from shy boys with calloused hands to men with scrolls of their own. You've seen the awkward, the proud, the tearful, the impatient, and watched them all soften under kindness. You spend your mornings reading aloud. Not because they need it, but because you enjoy the music of it. You pause often. Sometimes to cough. Sometimes to laugh. Sometimes because the weight of a word deserves silence. There's a new student, young, unsure, always asking whether he's doing things right. You tell him, rightness grows from roots. Be patient with the dirt. He carves that into his tablet, misspelling patience. You don't correct it. You just chuckle. Even mistakes have roots. You start losing friends. Some to illness. Some to time. Some just drift away. Each time, you grieve the same way, a full bow, a short verse, and a day of silence. You stop traveling, but messengers arrive. With questions, debates, invitations. You respond when you can. Sometimes with one line. Sometimes with a fable. Sometimes just a note that says, the answer is already in you. One of your most faithful students, Yan Hui, grows ill. You sit by his mat, holding his wrist gently. He says, I tried to follow the way. You whisper back, you became the way. He dies with a smile on his face. You cry later, alone, under the peach tree. 4 hours. Your students don't interrupt. They just wait nearby, sitting in stillness. Historians still argue whether these final years were Confucius at his most philosophical or his most human. The answer, of course, is yes. You begin to prepare for your own death, not dramatically, not fearfully. Just as one prepares for sleep after a long, full day. You select no tomb. You ask for a simple grave near your students. Let those who remember me walk through wisdom, not stone. Your final teachings are softer now. Less like instruction, more like lullabies. The moon does not chase the tide, but it still moves the ocean. The one who sits in peace shapes more than the one who shouts. Truth whispered to one ear travels farther than lies shouted at thousands. You laugh more in these days. Especially at yourself. One morning, you forget your own saying and make a new one. Your students point it out. You say, then let the contradiction be a lesson too. Your last days are spent in the courtyard. Wrapped in a worn robe. Drinking warm water. Watching the shadows move like thoughts across stone. And when you speak, the words come slower. Heavier. But always clear. Your students know what's coming. They don't ask. You don't explain. There's no need. You leave no grand farewell. Just this. When I go, keep walking. But walk gently. The world is tired. Be kind. You've passed now. Quietly. In the night. There was no thunder. No parade. Just the slow hush of breath leaving a body, the soft rustle of your final exhale, and the light patter of a breeze slipping through bamboo leaves. Your students found you in the morning, sitting upright, scroll still open, head slightly bowed as if in mid-thought. And in a way, you were. They didn't wail. Not immediately. They knelt. They folded hands. They remembered. Then they wept. The news traveled fast. Not because you were famous, yet, but because your presence had already rippled into so many hearts. The governor of Lu sent an envoy. Scholars from neighboring towns rode in on donkeys. Farmers you once taught how to measure rain by shadow stood beside merchants who once mocked you. they all came. And in the end, your wish was honored. A simple grave, no towering monument. Just a stone with your name carved modestly, and a nearby grove where your students could sit, debate, and occasionally nap. Your disciples, Xingzi, Zhigung, Yuzi, gathered every slip of bamboo, every note, every scribbled phrase overheard between sips of barley tea. They began compiling what would later be known as the Analects. Not a manifesto. Not a law code. Just moments. Snippets of you. Lines like, "The man of virtue makes demands on himself. To learn and not think is folly. To think and not learn is dangerous. Is it not a pleasure to study and practice what you have learned?" Scholars still argue about the accuracy of these lines. Whether your students edited you, whether they idealized you, but you always said truth was in the living, not the letter. As decades passed, rulers began quoting you to legitimize their reigns. Some truly believed you. Others wore your teachings like borrowed robes, stiff and poorly tailored. Dynasties rose and fell. Your tomb became a pilgrimage site. Your name became synonymous with order, discipline, tradition, but also with wisdom, with gentleness, with a stubborn belief that people could be taught to care for each other. The Han Dynasty officially endorsed your teachings, built academies in your honor, made your rituals national law. Statues appeared, paintings, commentaries upon commentaries. Confucianism, they called it, as if you'd wanted an ism. But it was never about labels. It was about living right, sitting straight, speaking gently, acting justly, even when it costs you. And over the next 2,000 years, you would be praised, debated, banned, revived, twisted, untwisted, rebranded, and rediscovered. One emperor would call you master of 10,000 ages. Another would burn your books. Centuries later, children in school uniforms would still recite your lines, sometimes understanding, sometimes just trying to pass the test. And you're long gone. But your thoughts are not. Your kindness, your questions, your soft-spoken rebellions, these have outlived kingdoms. You died quietly. But your whisper, it never stopped echoing. Centuries blur. Dynasties crumble. Cities rename themselves. Rivers shift course. Empires collapse in slow motion and rise again with new flags, new gods, new taxes. But your name lingers. Not like thunder. More like smoke. Gentle. Persistent. Inescapable. You become a figure carved into stone, painted onto scrolls, discussed in courts, murmured about by scholars who never met you but swear they understand your every pause. Children recite your sayings in dusty classrooms with ink-stained fingers and half-closed eyes. Rulers quote you to justify laws. Revolutionaries quote you to tear those laws down. Both claim you as their own. Some say you taught submission. Others say you taught resistance. Historians still argue whether you were conservative or radical. Whether your bowing was obedience or strategy. Whether your love of ritual was nostalgia or rebellion in disguise. You become curriculum. Then controversy. Then curriculum again. Your words are chiseled into marble in Korea, recited in Vietnam, painted in Japanese temples. Monarchs and monks compete to outdo one another in demonstrating how deeply they get you. They don't always get you. But sometimes, a farmer's daughter in a rural school reads, "It is not the robe that gives dignity," and sits a little straighter. Or a student in modern China hears, "To see what is right and not do it is cowardice," and closes a web browser filled with rage. Or someone in Brazil, or Nigeria, or London, finds your name in translation and thinks, maybe the world doesn't have to be cruel to be real. And that's what matters. Your legacy isn't the temples. It's not the statues or the bureaucratic rituals that became bloated imitations of what you meant. It's in those small, invisible moments. When someone chooses to listen instead of shout, to forgive instead of punish, to think before they judge, to walk the long road, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That's where you live now. Not in the past, but in every person who pauses, breathes, and tries again. Because of something you once said. Because of the lanterns you left behind. Now, the story slows. The road still stretches, but you've walked enough for tonight. Your feet may ache, your thoughts may linger on distant temples and dusty scrolls, but let them drift. Let them rest. You've met kings and madmen, danced with doubt, whispered truth into silence. You've left behind the loud, glittering rooms to plant quiet gardens instead. You never built monuments. You built people. And that is more lasting. Let the world spin now, gently. Let the old dynasties crumble again in your dreams, their banners curling like paper in the rain. Let the names of forgotten ministers fade into mist. Only the ones who loved remain clear. Only kindness echoes. As you settle into stillness, remember, the way was never somewhere you arrived. It wasn't how you walked. How you carried others. How you bowed, not to power, but to principle. So close your eyes now. Let the soft hum of thoughts slow. Let the voices fade into that wide silence that holds everything. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are simply on the way. And the way is quiet tonight. Sweet dreams.